So let me bring up the presentation. Here we go. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, toad versus frog. Similarities and differences. We know what both of them are, and we know what both of them look like. We've been in contact with both, I think pretty much everybody. But what's the difference between the two? Well, first of all, frogs have these long, powerful back legs that are used for jumping, jumping long distances, and also, I didn't put it in here, but for swimming. And they mainly live in the water or in wetlands, and they have smooth, slimy skin. And that slime on their skin is pretty much serves the same purpose as slime on a fish. It protects them from harmful bacteria in the water. So it's kind of like a protective jacket, if you will. Frogs eat insects and minnows and other tiny fishes. They blink when they eat. And it has been found that when they blink, it helps them swallow because it kind of it forces their throat to do this kind of contraction and release thing that helps push the food down their throat. And their calls are unique to their species and can be heard from many miles away. And I think some people know that, especially when it comes to like wood frogs or spring peepers. Their calls are just so loud, especially when there are groups of them together. You'd be amazed at how far away from you they really are. And finally, their skin does not have toxins in it.
Doesn't cause warts.
What's that?
Doesn't cause warts.
Right. It does not, definitely. So now, on the other hand, toads, they have short legs that are made for crawling and short hops. They don't do any of that long jumping that frogs do. They live on dry land, not in water. They have this rough, dry, bumpy skin. They eat insects only, so they don't eat minnows or anything else really that lives in the water. And those bumps, those are not warts. They are camouflage. And we'll come back to that in a second. They don't blink like frogs do. That's not something they do. And their calls can only be heard nearby. They do not have a vocal range that allows them to transmit their calls for, a mile away like frogs do. And their skin does have toxins in it. It does, and we'll talk for a minute here about how that happens. So Andy dropped off. He's coming back on here. Connecting. So with frogs and toads, we've looked at what's different. Now we're going to talk about what's the same, because there are similarities, quite a few similarities actually. And I liked this picture because it's from the angle it's taken, it almost looks like this frog is smiling. Now, frogs and toads are both amphibians. They both eat insects, which includes crickets, flies, grubs, and spiders, believe it or not.
Ooh.
Both lay eggs, and their skin is glandular, which gives off secretions. In the case of the toads, it's the toxins. And in the case of the frogs, it's that slimy outer coating.
I really do feel useless. Yep. Yep. Incubator at this point.
So what does it mean to be an amphibian? It means a number of things. First of all, they are not cold-blooded. There is really no such thing as cold-blooded. They are what is called ectotherms. And we talked about this in one of our other presentations. When we talked about herpetology. They are ectotherms, which we will discuss here shortly. They eat insects. That makes them an amphibian. They lay eggs, and they have an aquatic larval stage, which we all know as tadpoles. Now, what is an ectotherm? Well, the etymology of the word ecto means external and therm means heat. So put it together, external heat. And that comes from the Greek. And this is what it means. Reptiles and amphibians, they have to find warmth in order for them to be able to complete certain internal body processes. Humans self-generate heat to do this. Now, for example, a human can digest a meal, eat a meal and digest a meal when it is cold. You or I could eat a meal outside in 30-degree temperatures, and our body will immediately start to burn that food into energy to generate body heat. And any amphibian or reptile, and frogs in this case, can't do that. Now, a frog can eat a meal when it's cooler out, but can't digest it until it warms its body through finding a heat source. Again, externally, like sun, a warm rock, a sidewalk, something like that, because it cannot generate its own body heat. And the problem for these guys with this is if a frog eats a meal, let's say it, eats a handful of crickets, and it can't find some place to warm itself up afterwards, the crickets just stay in the stomach, and they can actually start to deteriorate and rot in the frog's stomach. And that can make the frog very, very sick and even cause it to die. And again, it's this way with all reptiles and amphibians. So that's what this means for them. It's very, very important to them to find heat sources, and it's important that uh, they go into their stasis during the winter time, because they definitely don't want to be eating during the winter. Now, when it comes to egg laying, look at the difference here. On the left, this is a cluster of frog eggs.
Mhm.
And on the right, this is a toad, and they do both lay in the water. The toad lays them in these long strings that can either be single or 2x2, as you see in the lower right photo there. But however they are laid, in both cases, each egg is surrounded in a coating of this kind of gelatinous material that protects the egg until it evolves into a tadpole, and they do both turn into tadpoles. And just this is a fun fact, but the American bullfrog, which is our most common frog, lays 12,000 to 20,000 eggs at one time in a year. 12 to 20,000. And this is how they propagate. And the big reason they do that is they don't get a shot at doing this over and over and over for, a bunch of years. Most frogs and toads die after they lay eggs. So they've only got this one shot at carrying on the bloodline, if you will. And there are some species that actually only lay 1 or 2 eggs. Not in this country, in South America, but it's pretty varied. So now we'll take a look at tadpoles, which everybody has seen and people like, kids like to collect them. Tadpoles in their life cycle, which they are actually, it's interesting. They are part of a frog or toad life cycle, but they kind of have their own sub-life cycle, if you will. For the first 12 weeks after they have gone from egg to tadpole, they eat plant matter. And if you happen to have some in an aquarium or a jar or large jar or whatever that you're trying to raise them, they will eat fruits and vegetables. They like that stuff. After 12 weeks, typically, in the wild, they will live on land and in the water, and will eat insects now, but they still eat plant matter. So they're omnivores at that point, really. So this is their life cycle, and we're starting with the eggs laid by the parent on day 1. And they go from the embryo stage to the young tadpole stage by week 3. And mostly what they do is, they're very small. Mostly what they do is cling to water plants, and they eat any bits of plant debris that they find on those, or that is passing by in the water. And they have external gills for breathing, You know, very much like the larval stage, as we had talked about previously with mayflies and stoneflies and the dragonfly nymphs. You know, they all have external gills for breathing while they are in their water life, their stage of living in the water. And the tail continues to keep growing on these guys. By week 7, the hind legs appear. And then after that, probably, I didn't mark it here, but about week 8 or 9, the tail starts getting shorter because there is actually nutrition stored in the tail, and they eat a little less out externally and live a little more on the nutrients that are in that tail. And as they do, the tail shortens. Then by week 12, the front legs appear. They've still got the tail, but it's getting shorter. And it gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And then typically by 1 year old, it is a young frog that very shortly turns into an adult. But I will tell you that is not always the case. And we will talk about that here for a second. Now, sometimes you've seen tadpoles that are this big or even bigger.
Oh,
Sometimes the frogs or toads will lay their eggs late in the summer, and I misspelled summer, isn't that nice? Will lay their legs late in the summer, and they have a thyroid just like we do, and their thyroid will tell them not to turn into an adult. It'll be fall and it'll say, do not turn into an adult yet. You need to overwinter as a tadpole. And then when the next summer rolls around and the water is warmer, then it will tell it to go ahead and turn into an adult. But it could make it stay in that status as a tadpole for 2 to 3 years. And it does happen. And that's when you see these really huge black tadpoles that don't have legs yet. And they can be twice as big as what's shown in that picture there easily. So yeah, they have a thyroid gland just like we do, and it's pretty much internally in the same position. It surrounds their trachea, and it serves, you know, the same functions, which mainly it tells the creature, it regulates growth.
Don,
Yeah,
putting this into perspective, the length of time it takes the tadpole to even sprout the legs and
Yeah.
to become the adult. I'm thinking about that, and I've been working on my nest boxes at Glacier Ridge, and and on that, you have such a short time from laying eggs to hatching, and then to full maturity and fledging. This isn't like in about 2 weeks or less. They can even start fledging as on like day 12 for the tree swallows that I do. And because of the predation, and because birds need a lot of energy, and it's high metabolism and a lot to have to eat a lot of tiny insects.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that frogs take so long to mature when you compare it to the birds.
Right.
And even that with the, you know, going back to dinosaur times and talking about common ancestors, that birds were once reptiles and everything. I find that incredible. That can take a year to grow a frog. And the birdies are out within like what, 35 days? Think after the egg is laid, 35 to 40 days, they're out of there for the smaller
Yeah.
birds, passerines. Incredible.
Well, look at humans. Look how long it takes us to go from, an embryo in the mother's body to a newborn, 9 months. And then once a baby is born, how long it takes it to go from that point to somebody who is walking and talking.
High expenditure of energy, that's for sure.
Crazy. It's a crazy amount of time, longer than any other creatures that I know of, if you put that all together.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is very interesting.
All right, sorry to interrupt, but I just
No,
was thinking
that's
about my
okay.
birds today, so that's very interesting.
Yeah. So again, when it comes to skin secretions, because they both have it, with frogs, it just smells and tastes bad. And again, it helps kill off bad bacteria in the water or prevent it from doing anything to them, making them ill. But then in the case of the toads, it's poisonous. There are quite a few toads, even not in this country, but there are quite a few toads in South America that for a human just to touch them can make you very, very sick.
Oh,
Won't kill you, but can make you very sick. And now Ohio has 15 species of frogs and toads. The toads I've underlined here are the Eastern American toad, which we all know, the Fowler's toad, which is pictured here, and the Eastern spadefoot, which the Eastern spadefoot is only in southern Ohio. And from what I understand, it's actually really only in just one county in southern Ohio. And I'm not sure which county it is, but it's just one county. But then aside from that, on frogs, we have Blanchard's cricket frog, Cope's gray tree frog, the gray tree frog, which we're all familiar with, I'm sure, mountain chorus frog, northern spring peeper, another one most people know, western chorus frog, American bullfrog, northern green frog, and those two are both the most common in our ponds and lakes and wetlands. And then one that the northern green frog is sometimes confused with is the pickerel frog. And it is called that because the spotting on its body is similar to that of a pickerel fish, northern pickerel. Then we have the northern leopard frog and the southern leopard frog, which are very similar looking to the pickerel frog, and then the wood frog, which I think everybody's familiar with, at least from the sounds of it. So that's the 15. And here is an interesting thing. All of Ohio's 15 toads and frogs have pupils that run horizontally, except that eastern spadefoot toad that lives down in southern Ohio, that's kind of rare for us. Their pupils run vertical. And you can see the difference in the two photos that I have here. The eastern spadefoot toad has eyes that are pretty much like a cat eye.
Mhm.
run vertically, whereas all the rest of these toads and frogs, their eyes, pupils run horizontally. Very interesting sort of thing. And the world's smallest frog, I thought this was interesting, is called the microhylid frog, and it lives in New Guinea, and it is actually smaller than a dime.
Hmm.
And this is not a photoshopped thing here. This is an actual photo, the microhylid frog. Now, you ready for this? The largest frog. The world's largest is the Goliath frog from South America, and I believe it's from New Guinea also, and it grows to be up to 12 pounds. So I have to believe that little boy's going to have himself a good frog leg dinner there, because that is one huge frog. And we think our frogs are jumpers here. I bet that I bet that frog can jump for a couple of yards anyway. So now, does anybody have any questions on anything? I like this picture.
Mhm.
Any questions? No? Okay. Let me stop sharing this then. Everybody see me again? And Christy has some things that she would like to share with us from her recent travels and
Ventures, yes.
explorations and so on. Christy's always going places and has tons of photos to show.
And lots of fun. I don't have any photos tonight, unfortunately, but and Carolyn, thank you so much for your patience with us, because before we left, Dawn was a little sick, and then I was trying to get ready to go, and we had a lot of planning to do. My husband has a brain tumor. It's not cancerous, but we had a lot of drama going on. He had an MRI. He's had it for 5 years. An MRI said that he needed emergency brain surgery, and I was not in a state to be able to do the show. And I really appreciate.
Can understand.
Sorry for all the last minute things, but and he got into this specialist and was going to have this gamma knife surgery, and the specialist felt like he didn't need to do it, and he felt like the tumor is liquefying, so he's keeping up with the drug regimen he's been on for 5 years that seems to starting to work finally. So and a lot of stress. And then I was gone for 2 weeks, and then unfortunately my mother, who's almost 87, my dad's almost 89, my mother got sick because we went separately and along the way. And so anyway, and then she gave it to my